Well, hi there, everybody, and a huge welcome to today's event, which we all know is very, very topical and a matter close to our hearts here in IOB and indeed to so many of our members. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mary O'Dea, Chief Executive at IOB, and I'm really delighted to welcome you all here to this event right across the financial services sector. Just to let you know that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on our IOB Learn platform. For those of you who hasn't experienced that, it's a really excellent personalised way of engaging with your learning. You'll see in the chat how you can download that as an app on your phone and have a look at all of the free content that's within that for our members. So hopefully you have a chance to do that. If you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. You'll see that just at the bottom there. And we won't be able to get to them all, of course, but hopefully we'll be able to get to a good number of them as we get through the event today. Now, of course, today's event is hugely timely. It couldn't be a more timely topic to be discussing, in fact. In conversations with leaders right across banking, funds and other areas of financial services in recent months, one theme and topic really comes to the fore, and that is the theme of sustainability in its broadest form. When the pandemic struck back in March 2020, I remember wondering what effect that would have on the sustainability agenda. And it's really great to see the commitment and the motivation of the financial sector to improve that sustainability. It's been strengthened and renewed, I believe, by our experiences through the pandemic. As we begin to emerge from this really challenging time, it's clear that sustainability must be the priority for the sector. And I hope that today's event acts as an important platform for that, for everybody, so that we can share learnings, discuss trends, and see what's going to work really well. I'm of course looking forward to hearing from Colin Hunt, AIB's CEO and IOB's President, to discuss AIB's journey on sustainability very shortly. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion featuring sustainability leaders from BPFI, from SIA Partners and from AIB, and this will be led by our Director of Digital at IOB, Emer McBride. So lots of interesting discussions ahead. Now, the pandemic, as I said, has really brought us face to face with a global crisis. And now we must face into an even greater existential threat, climate change. As Mark Carney, the UN Special Envoy for Climate Action and Finance said, and I quote, "We cannot self-isolate from the climate crisis." If we needed a reminder of just how critical the stakes are, then the last 2 months have really provided that for us. The release of the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has made it clear that the impact of climate change is already here and it's rapidly worsening. Closer to home, the Environmental Protection Agency, Met Éireann and the Marine Institute issued a joint report on climate change, which has painted a picture of its impact on our own country here in Ireland. This has already warmed by almost 1 degree. So what does that mean for us in Ireland? Well, our changing climate will lead to more erratic weather conditions, increased storms and rainfall, along with water shortages in summer. It will impact on farming, it will impact on agricultural practices. As an island, Ireland also is particularly vulnerable to the rise in sea level. We'll face increased risks of flooding along coastal regions, and again, we're already experiencing that. Of course, all of this pales in comparison to the potential global impact of climate change. Just this week, the World Bank warned that 216 million people could be displaced by 2050 if urgent action is not taken. 216 million people. Climate change is a systemic risk. It impacts all sectors of the global economy, and it's increasingly being recognised by scientists and political leaders as a threat multiplier. It exacerbates the likelihood and the impact of immigration, political conflict, famine, housing issues, and of course, the extreme weather events that we've been talking about. The COVID-19 pandemic put risk management front and centre for everyone globally. Now we must use the lessons learned over the past 2 years to help us better prepare for and mitigate the impact of climate change. While managing the risk and ensuring the sustainability of the sector is critical, we must also remember that the financial services sector really holds the key in securing the planet's future. Now just let that sink in for one moment. We cannot save the planet without the financial services sector. That's a pretty big reasoning to cope with. To examine a transition to a low carbon economy, the sector needs to drive significant investment in green projects. The government alone can't finance and achieve the targets for emissions and reductions. The sector's support here is essential, which is why the sector holds the key. The costs involved are substantial. Ireland's transition to green energy alone is estimated to cost over 40 billion euros. As we look to reduce our greenhouse emissions, green investment and innovation will accelerate our move to a sustainable economy and lessen the economic risks of an abrupt transition. We've also seen great progress in this space with the introduction of green bonds, green business loans, green mortgages, and the rapid growth of ESG practices both in Ireland and globally. Despite the imperative arising from this doomsday scenario, it is an exciting and transformative time for the sector. The products being introduced today will play a role in safeguarding generations to come, and that's the prize, of course. Now, sustainability, of course, is more than just the critical action needed on issues like climate and environmental change. In today's world, we also have an obligation to consider, measure, and report on the wider societal and governance impacts of our work. Governance remains so essential to building and maintaining transparency and public trust, something that we well know about in financial services. As leaders, we need to ask, how can we continue to build a culture of learning, inclusivity, integrity, and trust? In financial services, over the past decade, we've witnessed a transformation in how we do business. With the move to embrace ESG, it's making us reconnect with why we do business. This is quite a powerful question. Why do we do business? It gets to the heart of why we show up to work every day, our vision and our values. And that brings me to the real imperative here. Over the past number of years, the financial sector has been focusing clearly on developing a more effective culture to build trust and a meaningful relationship with all of its many stakeholders. The way financial services sector responds to the urgent call for action now will define this sector forever. And this really goes to the heart of that culture. Just as it responded to the pandemic with payment breaks for customers and enhanced technology solutions to support employees and stakeholders, the sector must respond to the crisis with urgent action and agility. Let us all be able to look back in 20 years from now and see how effective the response was in stemming potential disaster and how each of us played our individual role in relation to that. For Ireland, now is the time to become a sustainability leader within Europe and globally. The government has shown a strong commitment to this. Sustainable finance is one of its priorities within the Ireland for Finance 2025 strategy. And together with EU member countries, we're committed to reaching net zero climate emissions by no later than 2050. When a problem is this big, the solution can sometimes feel out of reach. But let's remind ourselves of the incredible global response to the pandemic so far and the important role that financial services has played in supporting that. We're ready to face this great challenge, probably the biggest challenge of our generation, and we'll face it together. Events like today give us the opportunity to come together as a sector and see the progress being made and to share the challenges that we're facing and discuss solutions. Today, we'll get an insight into some of this great work. Now, with that, I'm very excited to get today's event really underway and to introduce our keynote speaker. Colin Hunt, known to most of you, is the CEO of AIB. And also, I'm really delighted to say, He is the president of IOB. Today, Colin's going to share some of his insights from AIB's own sustainability journey. Bit of background on Colin. In March 2019, he was appointed CEO of AIB and an executive director, of course, on AIB's board. He joined AIB in August 2016 as managing director of wholesale, institutional and corporate banking. Prior to that, he was managing director at Macquarie Capital, where he led the development of its business in Ireland. Previously, he was special advisor, a policy advisor at the Department of Transport and Finance, research director and chief economist at Goodbody Stockbrokers, head of trading and research and senior economist at Bank of Ireland Group Treasury, and a country risk analyst at NatWest. So I think you'll see from that experience, he is uniquely placed to give us a very interesting vantage point on this particular topic. He's also has a PhD in economics from Trinity College Dublin and degrees in commerce and economics from University College Cork. And just before I pass over to Colin, a reminder of the questions and answers button down at the bottom if you want to put in any questions as we go along. Colin, really grateful for you joining us today and sharing your insights on this. Over to you.
Thanks so much indeed, Mary. It's great to have the platform this afternoon. I'm deeply privileged to be president of this great organization with over 33,000 members, one of the biggest membership organizations we have in the state. And I have this somewhat controversial view that banking and bankers can be a force for great good in society. And I think we have a special role and a very, very special responsibility in advancing the cause of sustainability, given the critical position that we occupy in the economies and in the societies that we serve. The first question is, what is sustainability? Well, this is something that I've been thinking about. What do we actually mean by sustainability? Inevitably, people's minds drift very quickly towards the environmental agenda when you mention sustainability. And absolutely, the most pressing concern, the most immediate task at hand is to address the massive environmental challenge that our planet is now facing because of our own behavior. But sustainability is broader than environmentalism. It is about the E, it's about the S, and it's about the G. And it is my firm view that when we talk about sustainability, what we are at its essence talking about is sustaining our society, sustaining our economies, sustaining our way of life, sustaining our industry, and sustaining the organizations in which we serve. I'll start off talking about environment, and that is, as I said, the most pressing issue. The data is undeniable. The world is going through a huge and unprecedented period of global warming. One of my concerns about how we address this is we talk about 2030, we talk about 2040, we talk about 2050. But all of the fears and all of the predictions in relation to the path of global warming that we've seen in the past and that might have looked extreme at a particular juncture, they've actually proven to be, in the main, conservative. And in fact, the pace at which the world is getting warmer is well in excess of baseline expectations. So time is not on our side. The clock is against us. And if we do not take this issue deadly seriously now and change the way that we act as individuals and act as organizations, well, then we are going to put the future existence of humankind as a species and the future existence of this planet at risk. It's as bold a statement as I can possibly make, but it has the added merit of being true. This is truly an existential crisis. And we who find ourselves in these positions have a special role and a special responsibility to do everything within our power to put sustainability at the heart of the agenda of business, not because it is a fad, or not because it is a marketing gimmick, or not because it's cool at the moment, but because it is critical and pivotal to the future existence of this planet and the sustainability of our way of life. At AIB, we think we've got three core responsibilities. One is as an organization, as an institution in our own right. We've got over 200 premises around the country. We've over 9,000 staff. So we're a substantial business in our own right. And we've made a commitment to be net zero by 2030. We're making very good progress in terms of reducing our consumption of the Earth's precious resources. We have a second role to play, of course, which is as a provider of capital. And we've been working hard to enhance our product suite for both personal and business customers in that regard. We introduced green mortgages, we've had 2 green bonds issued, we have green personal loans, and of course we have a dedicated team that is providing capital to industries that are addressing the climate action agenda. Fastest growing part of our lending book. I set up the team in late 2016, fastest growing part of the book in 18, 19, 20, and it will be once again the fastest growing part of the book in 2021. So we are putting our money where, or at least our shareholders' money where our mouth is, in terms of working hard to deploy capital as quickly as possible in a safe and sustainable way in advancing the cause of this very important agenda. And the third role we have to play is as a demander of products and services. And what we've done in that regard is that we have reshaped our third-party supplier code. We did that at the back end of last year, so that now the people who work with us as third parties, the people who provide us with products and services as we go about our mission, that we hold them to the same standards on sustainability that we set for ourselves. We've also engaged in a number of innovations, working alongside Coillte to plant 90,000 trees on behalf of our staff and our customers. We have made a number of significant commitments to biodiversity. We're working with Teagasc in relation to the future of agriculture and reducing the carbon intensity of that particular industry. And we've set out very, very clear targets in relation to the green tone of our lending book. 70% of new lending green and transition by 2030, the entirety excluding agriculture by 2040, and the entirety including agriculture by 2050. These are real hard targets. They are not sort of empty aspirations, and we are going to monitor, measure, and report on our performance against those targets every single year. So we've set out the ambition, we've set out the path, and we will be very open and transparent in reporting on our progress against those targets on an annual basis alongside our annual report. I also want to talk about the S, which is sometimes sort of almost forgotten about in terms of sustainability, but it is also vitally important. And we've made very good progress in terms of gender diversity. We've made good progress on the diversity and inclusion agenda. We have a big focus on financial literacy. We have launched a new program actually in recent weeks aimed at supporting 12 and 18-year-olds in the development and learning of key skills. And over 70% of all secondary schools in Ireland have now signed up to that. We've also rolled out dedicated sustainability training for all our employees, and in the past number of weeks we announced that we published a social bond framework. In the same way that we prefaced our green bond issuances with a green bond framework. We've now published a social bond framework, and we intend to raise monies on the capital markets for that social bond, which will see funds being directed towards improving access to education and to healthcare, and to supporting not-for-profits and charities, and also to helping SMEs in disadvantaged areas. And there's a huge amount of other work being done in the social area as well, because we are all deeply conscious of the fact that that growing inequality is a huge threat to society, and indeed to economies. And then finally, on the governance side, governance is one that probably gets the least public prominence, but it is the most important single aspect of the ESG agenda, because in the absence of getting the governance right, you won't make sufficient progress on either the E or the S. And at AIB, sustainability is a standing item on the agenda of the board. It is something that is discussed on a very high frequency basis at our group executive committee. One of my senior colleagues is charged with the overall responsibility for strategy and sustainability, and sits at the executive committee. We have a subcommittee of the board that is devoted to this agenda, to sustainability in the broad sense, in terms of the E, the S, and the G. And it is very, very, very much led from the top and of this organization, and is now central to our strategy and central to our ambition for the years ahead. It is one of our key strategic pillars, sustainable communities, and it is and its status as a strategic pillar emphasizes both its importance to us, but also serves as a guide to ensure that in all our actions and in all our decision making, that we are deeply conscious of the importance of this strategic agenda item. So what can we do as an industry? I commend the IOB for all the work it is doing on improving, on broadening its range of courses in this particular area. This is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for our industry, notwithstanding the scale of the challenge. So I call on you to be educated, to participate in the courses. There's really, really fantastic resources available to us all through the IOB, and I encourage you to use them. I also encourage you to be ambitious and to be authentic, because this is the greatest challenge we will ever face. We need to be ambitious if we are going to have a hope of addressing the terrifying phenomenon that is global warming. So please do be ambitious and do be hopeful. We've demonstrated in the past 18 months that we're an extraordinarily resilient people. I frequently reflect on how we would have reacted, both individually and collectively, if in the spring, in the very early spring of 2020, we knew precisely the length and severity of what was unfolding in front of us in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been through a horrific time in terms of its health, social, and economic impact, but we're coming through it, and we're coming out the other side of it at this stage. And also be hopeful in the back of what science can achieve. The vaccine has been an extraordinary medical development, and I'm very proud when I'm talking to international investors of how this country has shown very, very limited hesitancy in terms of the scale of inoculation that we've seen across the country. So do be hopeful, but also be personal, because we all have a role to play in this. we don't have time on our side. We can't rely on anybody else to do it. We all have to do it. We all have to play a role, personally and from a business perspective. No one individual, no one business, no one community, no one country can tackle this. But we can tackle it collectively. And I sincerely hope that the gathering, virtual or real, COP26 that lies a few weeks away from us will be more ambitious than anything we've ever seen before, and recognize the fact that the issue is probably more pressing than some of us even feared. The words that ring out in my ears more than anything else are the words from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change: inevitable and irreversible. That's what we're facing. We need to get serious about this agenda, and we need to put it at the very, very top of our own personal and corporate missions. It is the greatest challenge that we will face, and the consequences of us individually and collectively not addressing this issue seriously are horrific. So on that horrible adjective, I'll hand back to Mary.
Thanks very much, Colin. Thanks for that. And we can hear very much, I think, the passion in your voice as you talk about this. It very much is something that you care about at a personal level. And you mentioned there, as you mentioned at the end, and we're, I have to say, taken aback when you say, it is irreversible, absolutely irreversible. It's immediate. That's where we're at. And that's where we kind of were at the beginning of the pandemic. How has the pandemic impacted, and what you've learned from the pandemic impacted on AIB's sustainability plans?
I can recall at the very start of the pandemic, a senior individual in our industry, living in another country, was talking to me, and he said, the other way you're always yattering on about sustainability, you can stop that now, because the COVID-19 threat is so immediate and so present that we're going to just have to park the sustainability agenda for a while. We'll deal with the health emergency, and we might return to sustainability as a topic thereafter. I fundamentally disagreed with him, because I think that one of the things that COVID-19 did was it very, very clearly highlighted the interconnectedness of the world, but also it highlighted very clearly the fragility of the ecosystem on which we all depend. And the pandemic has accelerated a number of long-term trends, and it has put 3 long-term secular changes on steeper trajectories. One is digitalization. We removed I keep on saying inside in this place that we had 10 years of change in 10 months. It has accelerated the move to agile, flexible, hybrid working. We will not be going back to 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or 8 to 8 Monday to Friday in offices. That's unquestionably the case. And the third thing it has done is it has put sustainability right at the very heart of business agenda. For us, we had changed our strategic framework formally in November 2019 to include sustainable communities as part of that. I think our experience has been that, notwithstanding all the risks and the concerns driven by the pandemic, we managed to grow a part of our balance sheet in a period of great uncertainty. We managed to grow the part of the balance sheet at very, very impressive clip in a very, very risk-conscious way. And ironic, I think it's probably worth reflecting that this is, this is not only good for the planet, but it's also good for the institution. And the only part of our lending book that didn't require any COVID modifications was our green lending, was our energy and climate action lending. And that to me underpins not only that highlights the commercial logic to doing this. Like, it is possible to do well while doing good. And I think what the pandemic has done is it has heightened sensitivities around the area of sustainability, but it has also encouraged maybe people like us to be even more ambitious than we would have been otherwise. Something else that I've noticed in my engagement with investors is that if you go back 7 or 8 years, some of the most forward-looking progressive investors would have had ESG or sustainability almost as a closing item for a quick query in any investor presentations. Now it is front and center. And it is becoming increasingly a hygiene factor for institutional investors. They have specialist analysts in this area. And if you are not credible, if you're not sincere and authentic, if you aren't ambitious in relation to what you're doing about this, you're running out of time, because they will divert their funds. And the cost of capital to businesses that don't take this seriously will ultimately become prohibitive and will ultimately pull those same businesses down. So I think that, in the same way that we've had 10 years of change in 10 months for digital and for agile working, we've had probably a similar scale of advancement on this agenda.
That's really interesting, and I'm again really struck by that it's possible to do well and do good. So if you have the focus right, it's possible to keep those together. We're actually almost out of time for questions, but I do want to throw a couple of them that have come through the audience, Colin. So if I might just group a couple of them together. There's one or two questions around the role of regulation in this, whether it's global regulation or domestic regulation. Where does regulation fit into this, and should there be more sort of the push from the regulator, which we know we're seeing, as well as the institutions doing their own thing. Another question is around what's the market like for the new products. So we know that you have issued a green bond. We know you have a commitment for a social bond. What's the market like for this? And I know you've touched on that a little bit. You've already answered a question about your commitment to net zero that has come up here. So that's an interesting one. And then there's another question around, you grouped into, provision of capital, taking services, and the business. In the provision of capital piece of that, what does that mean about lending to fossil fuel industries? What does that mean for AIB? So that's a lot, Colin, if I might ask you to address those two.
Okay, regulators. Climate risk is on the radar. We've had, we're going to see more and more requests for data. We're going to see more and more requests for policy. Regulators will want to see us taking this very, very seriously, because they're absolutely right when they look at financial institutions who aren't taking into account the impact on the underlying collateral of flooding, global warming, the fact that you might end up with stranded assets. Are you overexposed to industries that are in that are heading towards their death throes over time? It is already an area of heightened interest, and this is going to be one-way traffic. As I see it, I could certainly see a situation arising where the risk weights attaching to brown and black industries will be increased very significantly, which will actually ultimately, of course, have a consequence on their cost of capital. Not to mention what investors will do to the cost of capital of these industries. On the bonds, we raised 750 million in our second green bond, which was in May of this year. The orders for the transaction peaked at just over 1.5 billion. So we were doubly subscribed for the issuance, and it priced very, very well. We issued 1 billion Green T2 in September of 2020 as well. There's a very strong market demand out there, and there is no issue in getting well-structured bonds of this nature away, certainly at the moment. Remind me of the other issues you raised very quickly.
So the regulator, the one with lending into, I think you've answered this.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So
we have a list of excluded industries, which is public. It's up on our website. You can go and look at it. It is something that I'm strongly encouraging the team to continue to grow and expand. And there are industries, we already have a situation where we're turning down credits. You know, we are committed to working with customers who are on a transition, but there are industries that we will not lend into. And that list is going to grow and grow and grow and grow as we move. But it's an inevitability if you think about it. We're out there with a 70% target for 2030. So it is inevitable that we're going to be, that the list of excluded industries will continue to expand.
Great, thanks for that, Colin. There are lots more questions, and maybe some of them will get picked up as we go through the panel piece as well. For the time being, can I say a huge thank you, Colin, for giving us that real insight, because I think what we got there was that when you roll up your sleeves and you're in the business and you're doing it, this is what it looks like. So I really appreciate that, Colin. Thanks for bringing that into the picture today. And Colin's going to come back to us at the end of the conference within our closing remarks, so I won't quite say goodbye to you yet. If I can move on then to our panel, and thanks everybody for your questions. As I said, hopefully some of these we'll get through now. We're going to discuss now sustainability trends in the post-pandemic landscape. And we're delighted to have sustainability leaders from BPFI, SIA and AIB. We're going to introduce those in just a moment. And to introduce those and to lead the panel for us, I want to call on my colleague who you'll see on screen just now, Emer McBride. Emer is our Director of Digital and Innovation. She's the Programme Director of our Responsible and Sustainable Finance Programme, participates in the Sustainable Finance SkillNet Committee and the European Bank and Training Networks Committee on Sustainable Finance. And she also recently acted as the rapporteur for the Skills Working Group as part of the Ireland for Finance Sustainable Finance Roadmap. So Emer, can I hand over to you to introduce our panellists, and we look forward to this discussion. Thanks.
Great, thanks Mary. I'm delighted to be joined today by Yvonne Holmes, Louisa Mahoney and David Cass. Yvonne Holmes is the Chief Sustainability Officer in AIB and has responsibility for the development and implementation of sustainability strategy across AIB Group. Yvonne's previous roles include Head of Analytics and Head of Consumer Strategy. Yvonne is a member of the Chambers Ireland Sustainable Business Council and Chair of the Sustainable Finance SkillNet. Louise is Head of Sustainable Banking at BPFI, driving sector integration of ESG factors and facilitating dialogue between BPFI members and policy stakeholders. She is responsible for monitoring and responding to the EU Sustainable Finance legislative agenda and for engagement on domestic climate action initiatives, with a particular focus on the mainstreaming of financing for energy efficiency. She participates in the European Banking Federation Sustainable Finance Working Group, the Department of Finance's Public and Private Climate Action Group, the Sustainable Finance SkillNet Committee, and is a Director of Safeguarding Ireland. David is a consulting partner with over 20 years experience delivering business strategy, organisational change and operational efficiency programmes for blue chip clients in Ireland, the UK and globally. He is responsible for growing and leading the transformation and change team for SIA Partners Ireland, leading their market-facing teams and delivering CFO and finance transformation services, as well as financial services consulting teams. To get us started, we've heard about AIB's sustainability journey from Colin, so I might ask Louise and David, perhaps starting with Louise, to tell us a little bit about their own organisation's sustainability journey. Before I pass over to Louise, though, if anybody does have any questions, we are reasonably short on time for the panel discussion. But if you do have any pressing questions for the panel, please do pop them into the Q&A pod. So Louise, you might tell us a little bit about your own and I suppose BPFI's sustainability journey.
Thank you, Emer, and thank you very much to Mary and Colin for those fantastic speeches. Really inspiring to see how the strong messages coming out from the sector on this. As people probably know, BPFI is a representative body for the banking sector with 25 people working here on a very busy agenda, both interpreting new legislation and initiatives from Brussels and Dublin, as well as globally, with the key aim to position the sector with national and European authorities and to make sure the sector's views are heard. It is incredible to see the speed over the last year with which this item has climbed the priority agenda within our membership. I think that reflects the rollout of the European Sustainable Finance Regime, pressure from investors and clients, and just reading the paper every day. And seeing how urgent this is becoming. So this is definitely a sector priority at the moment on a busy list, including SEER, SME support, capital requirements, etc. We've come a long way. I actually started working on this in 2017 via the European Mortgage Federation, looking at the possibility of lower capital risk weight requirements for green mortgages, and that's still very much a key item for us. So at the time it was very much a nice to have, something I literally did on the side of my day job. And now, like we're all saying, it is centre stage. At BPFI, we have the Sustainable Finance Forum with 78 people from across our membership participating. It's an unusual committee for us. It's a dynamic mix of upstream risk, strategy, product development, sustainability officers reporting, reflecting a really key point that sustainability is now cutting across the entire firm within our membership. It's no longer a lone CSO person looking at carbon footprint, although that's obviously very important. It's something our sector has done very well on. But it really allows us to leverage the internal expertise, but also we have great access to global and European banks as part of our FEBI membership, and we can leverage the expertise and insights there into best practice integration of ESG within our membership. As we know, our members are signed up to the UN principles on responsible investing and now the principles of responsible banking. I see a question in on that as well. Implementing the recommendations of the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, integrating science-based targets. It is extremely busy, and the legislation is coming at us every which way. I'm not going to go into that today, but members of the forum are used to being bombarded really by updates on taxonomy disclosures, CSRD, etc. And it is non-stop. The pace of regulation is really astounding. So we talk about mainstreaming sustainable finance. The European Commission will say it won't be sustainable anymore, it'll just be finance. I think that's a great goal. BPFI and FEBI did an informal survey earlier this year in April, I think, and the findings are interesting. I think 37% of the respondents were already involved in integrating climate risk within their business. 29% were involved in sustainable products, services or operating models. So that's all people integrating ESG. It's still quite internal, although our members do have fantastic products for retail clients and corporate clients. I think an interesting stat that will probably change and go higher is that right now 28% of respondents saw business opportunities now in integrating ESG and developing sustainability products, but in a 3-year horizon the ambition for leveraging that was 72%. As you know, we work very closely with the European Banking Federation, their sustainable finance work on preparation for the legislation. Taxonomy is a really, really big issue for us at the moment, not only to make sure our institutions understand the implications of it, especially when it's still a lot of the aspects of it are still in play, as well as the disclosures and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, but also to understand how businesses and counterparties of banks are understanding it and how they will be able to demonstrate the sustainability, the proportion of their economic activities that are sustainable. a big aspect I want to touch on actually on this is collaboration. From the get-go, actually, when we started on this, working with the European Mortgage Federation and the EBF was essential. Also working with Sustainable Finance Ireland, who they were then Sustainable Nation Ireland, who were just delighted, I think, that we had a forum and we're really looking at this. But that kind of collaboration is essential. We actually meet with the Department of Finance every 6 weeks on this, and this is very much business as usual for a representative body, but it's a meeting dedicated to discussing the legislation that's coming up and how we can respond and how we can identify shared issues. And we've had some good successes there. And we also meet with the Central Bank each quarter, and we're really looking forward to their roadmap that should be out, as far as I know, this quarter actually, because they've been quite clear on their ambition here, and we're really looking forward to understanding what exactly they are expecting of members.
Exactly. And sorry to cut across you there.
No problem.
But I'm just conscious of time. I do want to bring David into this part.
Of course. Thanks, Emer.
Actually, kudos to you as well for addressing some of the questions that came up. So that was a very great to see the huge amount of activity that's coming from BPFI. So thank you for that. David, I might ask you to briefly just give the audience just a view of the great work that you guys are undertaking as well.
Sure, great. Thanks, Emer, and thanks to the IIB for the opportunity to present here today. It was really interesting to hear Colin's comments on where AIB are going and to see their leadership in the space. I guess for me, I'm 20 years in consulting and in the industry. And across that time, I guess in my journey, I've seen a huge amount of change in the space. You know, at the very start of my career, these projects in CSO or sustainability or ESG were very much fringe projects or trophy projects in companies that, you know, were very progressive or very profitable. But these days, it's becoming much more of you know, something that has to be on the agenda of every corporate, and you know, even in non-direct consumer-facing industries. Most organizations have to have a strategy in the space. They have to be committed and have resources, and it's going to become basic table stakes in enabling them to do business in either B2B or B2C world. So I think that's something that's been very clear and has accelerated, as Colin pointed out, over the last few years. Huge challenges to organizations in doing that, right, in terms of regulatory uncertainty, reputational concerns, commercial cost issues. But the flip side to that is there's huge opportunity, right? And we're seeing in organizations we work with, you know, those that are tackling these concerns in a positive way becomes a source of resilience, cohesion, and really potential long-term savings and revenue drivers for these organizations. So, you know, it becomes a virtuous circle, you know, in taking on these opportunities, and they become, you know, less have to do's and more actually things that people are investing in and go into the marketplace to look at. So that switching perception is key. As a management consulting company, I guess we're focused on delivering business transformation, right? And CA Partners is interconnected in lots of different companies in the FS space, or in energy, or in retail, or in government. And we play a strong part and a strong role in advancing and promoting these initiatives within organizations, right? But also leading the way in enabling companies to implement sustainable business models and practices, but not only for themselves, but really to transform the very markets and industries they serve. CA Partners is a next generation consulting firm, so it's grown up in this world. You know, we're only 20 years old. We're not adapting to it. You know, the CSR values are built very in from our foundation, and it's reflecting our consulting for good initiatives, where we look to get 20% of our revenue from these 4 pillars we have in climate analysis, social responsibility, ethics, compliance, and responsible AI. So we're at 15% now, and we're really driving to that 20% of delivering this through our business as we go forward. And it's a key part of who we are, which helps us grow the market, but also helps us change the market and drive our own business and our teams.
Absolutely. And actually, David, it's really interesting. And sorry, I know you could continue to speak for a number of minutes on it, but actually it's a really interesting point in terms of more, I suppose, long-standing businesses like we've heard from AIB, and we're about to hear from Yvonne now, how it's just the different approaches, you know, those who have grown with the ESG at the center versus those who perhaps aren't, but actually are a huge organization with a huge footprint, as Colin suggested, but actually can still integrate it in. So it's interesting to see that both are possible. Yvonne, I might come to you for a second. We spoke about the market demands, and Colin mentioned it in particular, and there was a couple of questions in the audience about it. Are you guys noticing, I suppose, a shift in how your customers are engaging with sustainable or green products? And is there a difference between personal and business customers on it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And thanks for inviting me to be part today. So for personal customers, I think it's more straightforward, you know, in terms of the steps and transition that they need to make. It's easier for them to get their heads around it, I think, than business customers. And we're finding, you know, the green mortgage, the retrofit loan, the electric vehicle propositions, they're really growing in demand. But that demand is kind of held back to a certain extent in terms of, you know, the supply of what they need to do. So whether it's retrofitting, you know, everything kind of needs to move in tandem. So on the personal side, I think, you know, customers are more comfortable and starting to understand better the steps they can take. I think on the corporate side, a lot of our corporate customers are on the journey. They're already reporting, you know, they're understanding the agenda, and we're seeing the sustainability linked loans really growing in terms of popularity. So that's where they get, you know, discounted pricing if they reach predetermined ESG targets. On the SME side, I think that understanding and maturity is at different levels across the patch. And I suppose we're looking to work with our customers to try and help them understand and navigate the changes that they need to make. And, you know, we've partnered with the Dublin Sustainability Academy, you know, to help train SMEs in understanding the journey and the steps that they can take. And I know Colin had mentioned about Teagasc and other partnerships that we have in place in helping different sectors to kind of work in that area. But I think the SME space is probably where a lot more needs to be done in helping and supporting our customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. We have time for a couple of questions. And I suppose Colin mentioned the need for us all to immerse ourselves in sustainability and to upskill and to educate ourselves for it. We know, you know, both myself, Louise, and Yvonne are involved in the Ireland for Finance roadmap in various degrees. So we know that there is an upcoming roadmap for us all that we've all fed into in terms of what the critical skills are. But and again, conscious of the time, but I'd like to just get all of your views on what do you think the critical skills are, like the 2 or 3 critical skills for the industry are in terms of ESG. And Yvonne, I might start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. So data is the biggest challenge that's quoted, and we're, you know, that is a challenge in terms of, first of all, you know, understanding the data that's required to quantify the risk, to be able to benchmark and measure your emissions, to be able to assess, you know, the overall portfolio view and the new metrics that need to be in place. So I think data skills is one area, and that's across risk analytics as well, when you consider the new modelling and scenario and stress testing work that needs to be done. Understanding climate risk at all levels across the organisation, I think, you know, in terms of the training, that has to be a key focus from board level right down to frontline staff. And a deep understanding of the regulation. It's like a spider's web with different overlaps, different timeframes, different perimeters in terms of what applies to where. So that, you know, skills and understanding of ESG and how that happens to impact the business. And then I think the last area is in being able to understand and assess the opportunities, you know, as new business models are generated, you know, new gaps emerge, how we're supporting that. So the skills required in that area also need to be looked at.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Yvonne. And David?
Yeah, I totally agree with Yvonne there. That's where we see the skills here coming in, like it's tech and AI and data, right? And being able to bring in all of the information from multiple different areas. It's not just your own business, it's not just your own market, it's being able to bring out information from the whole ecosystem, bring it into one place and understand it, and, you know, put business understanding on it to deliver real insights, because the investment decisions now are much more broader in these areas than they are, you know, when you're looking just at a product or just at a market. You need to take in tons of information around you, and you need to be able to look at that in real time. So I think, you know, AI and automation and bots in this space will be able to, you know, look at the market, look at what's happening outside your firm and outside your system, and bring that in and allow you to, you know, monitor that in real time and make changes in real time to make the benefits. Because the you know, the benefits can be quite tight on some of these projects and programs, and seeing that in real time, being able to change and pivot very quickly, I think skills in that space are going to be huge and in real demand coming forward in the future, I think.
Absolutely, you can absolutely see the connectivity throughout it between digital and sustainable as well. Before I hand back to Mary, Louise, I might give the final 15 or 20 seconds in terms of the critical skills to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, everything Yvonne and David have said there, absolutely fintech is critical to this as well, risk. I would think education of boards, we had a fantastic meeting recently with the INEDs about this, so what's needed there to make sure boards understand it so it does go through the organisation, tone from the top. Also, maybe more on the retail banking side, but how to translate it for customers, you know, like it's all that skill around risk, but you know, there will be a supporting role there for SMEs, as Yvonne pointed out, also for retail customers. Really looking forward to the government's support scheme coming out in January for retrofitting, but all that, how you translate it, how you help them on the journey, how you make them see it as an opportunity. And that's what I would wish for 2022, that this is seen a lot of risk to manage. It's crucial, but also it's an opportunity for the banking sector and the financial services sector, I should say, and how we drive that out.
Absolutely, and actually it's great to end on a note of opportunity as well, which is brilliant. So thank you for that. Yvonne, David and Louise, thank you so much for your insights and for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you all, and I'll pass back to Mary now. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emer, and especially huge thanks to David, to Yvonne and to Louise for their inputs there. There's a bit of an analogy here, I think, with the speed with which we have to act for what's going on the planet and the speed with which we're motoring through our events today, because we're getting lots and lots of fantastic information in double quick time. I do want to hand over now to Colin for some closing remarks. And before I do, though, let me make a big personal thank you to Colin, not just for today's event, but Colin as a president is hugely supportive of our role and mission in IOB in raising standards in financial services. And we really appreciate everything you do for us in that, Colin. IOB, of course, will be there absolutely for our members through this journey. And you'll see over the next couple of months a number of major supports for us for this sustainability journey as we roll out our skill portfolio around this issue. So Colin, can I hand over to you, please, to close us out as President of IOB? Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Mary, and thanks to all the panelists today. I thought that was really very, very interesting. This is such a huge topic. We could be here all day talking about it, and that is what makes it truly, truly exciting. It's been a great pleasure for me to be here today, and as I said, this is something that no individual or no company or no country can address comprehensively. It has to be addressed taking into account our collective accountabilities and our collective responsibilities, and very much in that spirit. I'm delighted to be able to extend an invitation to all the members here present to attend our 5th AIB Sustainability Conference, which is going to take place on the 11th of October, and which has a brilliant, cracking set of speakers turning up to educate and illuminate and inform on this critical topic. So how diverse and how inclusive is that? We're inviting people from any number of financial institutions to come and participate and attend our sustainability conference at the start of Climate Finance Week 2021.